Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Scottish Conservatives are pleased to bring this debate to Parliament today, and I'll start by moving the motion in my name. The motion addresses a very few serious points which have thus far been ignored by the Scottish Government. I'm hoping that we can reach cross-party agreement today and to send a signal to all the hard-working childcare partnerships throughout Scotland that their concerns will be addressed. 4 years ago, the SNP pledged to almost double childcare provision from the 600 hours to the 1140 a year by August 2020 for all 3- and 4-year-olds and some eligible 2-year-olds. Quite the headline, but one question lingered: how would this be achieved? It is clear that there has been a distinct lack of planning involved in following through on this promise, and it is left to continue at its current pace, then the 2020 target will not be met. In fact, the level of provision will likely decrease going forward. Almost half of the nurseries say they are unlikely to meet the target of 1140 hours, with many pointing to underfunding as a significant barrier to doing so. This has been echoed by Audit Scotland, who in their recent report on the expansion of childcare highlighted a staggering black hole of £160 million a year in the policy's funding. The motion focuses on one of the main reasons this policy is failing, and that's the lack of inclusion of the private sector, despite the constant assurances by the Minister that they are valued partners. There are over 6,000 private childcare providers in Scotland. They play a huge part in developing Scotland's children, yet they are being swept aside. I've met with several partnerships and local authorities, and one theme has been prevalent. There is a total lack of consistency and understanding in the rollout of the 1140 hours policy across local authorities. These issues faced by private providers can be boiled down to 3 major problem areas: the revenue funding rates across local authorities, the catastrophic staffing drain, and the lack of access to capital funding for private providers. As it stands, there is no standard hourly rate of funding across Scotland, meaning private providers in some local authorities receive significantly less than those in other local authorities. Private providers are receiving varying rates across councils from £3.75 to £4.50 to £5.31, a material variation and a total lack of consistency. And one thing that I would like to make clear here is that the private sector nurseries are not big multinational corporations. They are usually small, independent organisations with very tight profit margins. When operating at such a level, the slightest change in external factors can lead to difficult business decisions needing to be made. This lack of top-line funding is preventing private nurseries from being able to pay many of their staff even the living wage. The impact of this is that local authorities are able to attract staff currently working in private nurseries to work for more money and fewer hours. This has a devastating impact on private providers, causing a mass exodus of their childcare staff, which will ultimately affect the delivery of high-quality childcare in the long run. This is the reason the Scottish Conservatives will be supporting the amendment by Mary Fee, because the staffing problem is a huge thorn in the side of the feasibility of this policy in delivering good quality childcare for children across Scotland. I now turn to the third and possibly the most avoidable problem facing private providers: the lack of access to capital funding. Capital funding is supposed to be available to all childcare providers, but many private providers I have met with have noted with frustration that local authorities are denying them access to funding and instead almost exclusively awarding it to their own council-run nurseries without even considering private partnerships. Worse than that, there is confusion in several local authorities regarding whether or not private providers are actually entitled to receive capital funding. I spoke with representatives from one authority yesterday who were quite indignant at the idea of private providers expecting to receive capital funding, and another local authority who basically said, "Oh no, you're not entitled to that." This can be cleared up today, So I'm asking the Minister whether she will write to each and every local authority to make clear the correct position regarding access to capital funding. And I'm happy to give way now to the Minister if she will confirm here that that is what she will do. Thank you.
Marie Todd.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to write and clarify the position. There is an issue around state aid in terms of local authorities providing capital funding direct to private businesses, but one local authority in particular, Angus, has found a way around that and is providing capital grants funding, and that is something that we are sharing throughout the country. That learning is something that we are sharing throughout the country through the Partnership Forum. If you would like me to write out to all the local authorities and explain that situation, I'm more than happy to do so.
Alison Harris.
Sorry. Yeah, I thank the Minister for that response, and yes, I would like you to do that straight away, please, because there is confusion, and the fact that you're mentioning one local authority when there are numerous local authorities out there actually is indicative, indeed, the SNP's indifference to the scale of the problem and the apparent inability to take on board what everyone is saying. Talk of partnership and engagement has been plenty, but these are warm words which are worryingly hollow. And I worry that the lack of understanding of the true partnership required between local authorities and private providers is preventing any meaningful progress from ever being made. If the expansion is going to succeed, this needs to change, and it needs to change now. While there is obviously cross-party support for the 1140 hours target, I think we have to take a sensible, practical approach to expanding childcare. In the current day and age, flexibility is the #1 childcare concern for many parents. 90% of council nurseries do not provide full working day childcare places, and almost none of them offer places starting before 8 in the morning or lasting until after 5:15 in the evening. Unfortunately, this is just not adequate, with parents and carers working outside of the available time windows. As it stands, many parents will be unable to access their full entitlement due to full-time work commitments. Often it is the private providers who are able to offer more flexible hours. But if the partnerships continues to break down, they will go out of business, and that flexibility will actually disappear going forward. Presiding Officer, I'm hoping that all parties in this chamber will support the motion and Labour's amendment today, because we all want Scotland to have a successful childcare system. We are all behind the 1140 hours. However, unfortunately, since the big headline announcement 4 years ago, the Scottish Government's implementation has been poorly planned, staggeringly unclear and damaging to children, parents and nurseries throughout Scotland. Thank you.